Okay, everybody, as you can see by the title above, Waking Up Black America to the Lies of Islam and the Democratic Party, Part 1, Islamic Lies with the Nation of Islam. That's where we're going to start. What my goal is in this is to hopefully give the black Americans that aren't aware, because I do believe the majority of business class, working class, educated Americans outside of that Democratic-controlled city ghettos are very aware of the truth, and they know these things already, and they're enjoying the prosperity of America in pursuit of their dreams and happiness, while a large minority of, or actually a large majority of the black Americans trapped within the Democratic ghettos are being blinded by lies. And that's what I want to get to. But first, I'd just like to say, so everyone understands, my knowledge of these things goes back to the 70s when I was a kid. I'm somebody who didn't really start attending school until I was near 13 years old. But as the youngest of 7 children in my family, my youngest sister, who would be older than me, when she started attending school, I was not even 5 years old yet. And out of curiosity of what she was learning is what led me to learn to read pictorially from a dictionary. And when I learned, by the time I was 5, I was very able to read the newspapers and books, and just as good as anybody could read. I taught myself pictorially from a dictionary. And my education for the majority of my life up till 13 was self-educated, with periodically going to school on and off. I didn't care for school. I was a shoe shine kid. I cared more about being on the corner shining shoes, making money. And the schools had no problem with letting me in the front door and out the back door with other kids that I hung with who were like street city gang kids. They didn't care for us to stay in the school anyway, so we would go in the front door and out the back door. So I really didn't start attending school until I was 13. I just want to make sure everybody understands that my knowledge of these things come from that of my childhood studies at the time in relation to Islam as well, because when I was a city kid in the ghetto of Newark, New Jersey in the early 70s, we had the issues rising up then of the 5%er Nation of Islam racist gangs, and as well the Nazi skinhead white racist gangs. So these were where my information I started reading up back in those times. As well, I'd like to disclose that in 1988 through 1989, I did spend those 2 years among a Muslim majority population, witnessing how they recruit, how they use the tactics of fear, threat of death, and what have you, to try and convert people to Islam, and as well how they prey on the criminal-minded and ignorant people who don't have a proper education and understanding the truth and are easily swayed. They target that demographic of people in America and around the world. So I just want to give people so they understand this is not something indoctrinated in me. It was my own study and search for the truth and quest of understanding the truth of American history, world history, cultures, and religions, of what's now I have 47 years in that study. And I'm still studying, I'm still researching, and all I care about is the truth. So that's what we're going to get to. We're going to take a look at the truth. And that truth, looking at that truth, starts here. We look at here, we have the Nation of Islam, which I'm sure most inner city black Americans are aware of the Nation of Islam. It's an organization that was founded by, and they say here, this is something too, when you're understanding it's being put out to the black Americans, that Muslims arrived in America 400 years ago as part of the slave trade, and today are vastly diverse. This is what they say. But as we move forward, we're going to look at some truth here. This is the guy who's the founder of the Nation of Islam. It happened in 1834 here in the United States. With him coming along was the first mosque ever established. This was allowed to happen under the Democratic Party's allowed this to go on and happen. In my opinion and views, which we'll discuss in further videos as we go forward, in truth, up until this point, Islam was not allowed in America. There's plenty of evidence to support that, but right now this video is mainly focused on the lies of Islam to the black Americans, so that's where we're going to try and keep our attention. After this was founded by Wallace D. Fard, who is the man who actually recruited this guy, who was called, and it even tells you here, and I'll include links to all this so people can see it. This is the man they call Elijah Muhammad. This man from there led out to recruit this man, who is very well known throughout. He's the main pusher of the Islamic Nation of Islam here in the United States. And he was the man who taught this man, Malcolm X. And then Malcolm X and him, as well as those that were forming in the 1950s and 60s Nation of Islam here, they started after targeting, because Malcolm X himself was a former criminal. He was in prison. This is where he started to get exposed to the Nation of Islam. That seems to be a breeding ground where they focus their attention is at the people who have a gripe with the government, and some majority of those people in there are not very educated. They're ignorant to truth and history and what have you, and they're easily swayed by feeling like they can turn the system around. Islam does that. It'll turn the American government to the criminal to be the bad guy and the criminal the good guy. That's their goal, to make you feel like you're better than the people who put you in jail. So that was their goal, and it's very easy to do that with the criminal minded. So that's what they preyed on. Malcolm X was one of those men, but though I do think Malcolm X was a great man, I thought he was a very smart man. He learned a lot, and in the end you're going to realize he was awakening to a lot of the truth I'm telling you right now. But their main focus of target would have been this man, Muhammad Ali, which was formerly known as Cassius Marcellus Clay. Muhammad Ali, I just want to real quick go back and just say, Muhammad Ali was a great world champion in his time, and he was not a very educated man. He was named Marcellus Cassius Clay after a great abolitionist out of Kentucky, Marcellus Cassius Clay, which is something I want to have up. Marcellus Cassius Clay. I want to have this so we can see this as we go forward. But that's just there. I want to go back here. We're going to go back and go here. So, as we were saying now, I have a video here where he explains why he changed his name. And these things are very important to understand as we progress forward. And I'm trying to move as quick as possible, but also give as much information as possible, because, too long of a video, I'm going to lose your attention. Nobody's going to pay attention to it. So, let's take a quick listen to what he says.
Which are names to fit us black people and claim knowledge of ourselves. One speak.
Don't claim to be called Clay anymore.
No, Clay was not my name. One speak, follow, believe, and hear, understand the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and come into knowledge of ourselves that we want to be called after names of our people, which are names to fit us black people. And Clay was a white man's name. It was a slave name. And I'm no longer Clay. I'm no longer a slave. So now Muhammad Ali.
Do you answer with Clay anymore?
So he changed his name because he says that Marcellus Cassius Clay, his name, was a slave name given to him by the white man, and he doesn't want the white man's slave name, is what he said, right? And that is very important that you remember this. So and then as we go forward, we see here, this is something of a little bit of history maybe people don't know. My understanding as well with him became from a guy, Benny, who was a black World War I veteran who hung in a diner on Grove Street in Springfield Avenue with my pop-pop and my uncle, Bernard. I used to talk. Benny was a black World War I veteran, or a World War II veteran, I'm sorry. And he was a very educated man. He couldn't stand Muhammad Ali because Muhammad Ali did this. He considered him a traitor. And that was a black World War II American Republican veteran. So I learned some things from him about this, how I know about some of the history of this and how to find it. But in relation to Muhammad Ali's here, I just want to say, one night at the skating ring, this is a letter he wrote to why he had converted over to Islam. So I want you to see this here. While I was standing outside the building in a crowd of about 400 people, all black people, like most boys, I was looking for a pretty girl to say something to. A black brother dressed in a black mohair suit with a white shirt and a black bow tie was selling some newspapers called Muhammad Speaks. At that time, it was the first time I had seen Muhammad Speaks newspaper. The brother walked up to me and said, "My brother, do you want to buy a Muhammad Speaks newspaper so that you can read about your own kind, read the real truth of your history and your true religion, your true name before you were given the white man's name in slavery?" So this is from an actual letter to why Muhammad Ali and how he was exposed to Islam and what he was told. So understand again, this is where he gets this ideology of that, his name Muhammad or Marcellus Cassius Clay is that of the white slave man, giving him that name, and that he's told to learn his real religion, his real name, of his real culture as an African American, are African, not even an African American, just not an African. According to the person telling him this, who was another black Muslim, telling him, which some speculate this may have been Malcolm X. This is what some people say. It might have been Malcolm X. And later on, in other things, I did see in interviews where Muhammad said that one of the first exposures he had to the Nation of Islam was with Malcolm X. So, there's propaganda on that, rumors, whatever. But the main thing is, let's go on. He spoke about seeing this right here, as well as a comic that was in the newspaper of the Muhammad Islam. And it showed that the white man was oppressing the black man with Christianity. And Islam teaches that the white man afflicted the black man with Christianity. That this is what the Nation of Islam tells black Americans, that Nation of Islam, Muslim Islam, is their native religion, and that Christianity was forced on them by the white man when they came here to the United States of America. And that it's not really their religion, and that their true religion is Islam. This is what they are told. And as you can see in this one here, it depicts that a white man whipping a black man during the time of slavery. The following video that's going to follow is about Democrat and the truth of the Democrats. I tell all black Americans I want you to really pay attention to that video when it comes out, because it gives you a truth about the understanding of slavery in America and around the world before America. So you get a true understanding of the facts of what you have to consider. But anyway, back to this. So this is what he says. So when we see here, and then we also realize that Muhammad Ali was able to use Islam as a way to dodge the draft for Vietnam. I don't really think he so much dodged the draft as he was indoctrinated to do these things by the Muslim leaders. But, this is how it is. Now, here we have this man here is Louis Farrakhan. Now, as we went through the progression before, this is the guy, Wallace D. Fard, is the founder of Islam. He established, under Democratic Party administration at the time, the first what's called Mother Mosque in 1934 here in the United States. Elijah Muhammad was the man who was taught by Fard about the Nation of Islam. And then he taught this to Louis Farrakhan, who at the time, when he was a young man, was a failing entertainer, trying to be like a pop singer who wasn't making it very big. He actually had also took part in as a Christian preacher with a scam thing, I believe, of like a carnival traveling religious thing to con people out of money, like many of them do in all religions. But eventually he learned about the Nation of Islam from Elijah Muhammad, and then he's the man who taught Malcolm X, and like we said, Malcolm X the man who taught Muhammad Ali. So, and then we understand the teachings of what goes on here. So here we are, we have him. I want to listen to this clip real quick.
You are making them to believe that something exists that you know does not exist. So the real liars, the real deceivers, the real game players, see, that's who are afraid of my coming, because the truth in my mouth exposes their lies, their deceit, their chicanery. While I was walking through the museum of voting and civil rights, it took...
Now, the point of that was, I want to just back up a little bit, because this is the point I want to put out about what he says here.
Farrakhan did not come to disrupt what doesn't exist. He said,
pay attention to all these people, how they buy into this guy and what he's saying. And now the most important thing is what I'm trying to point out in this video, what he speaks about, what his mouth says in the truth. I want you to pay very close attention to what he says, because what I'm about to show you is the truth.
our people are not foolish. We don't need magic. We need truth.
I agree with that.
We don't need magic. We don't need deception.
I agree with that.
We need truth.
I agree with that.
Those of you in power, you know that you're deceiving black people.
Oh, I don't know about that.
You are making them to believe that something exists that you know does not exist.
Now, he just said that people of America are trying to deceive black people about something, saying that something exists that don't exist. And his whole thing here is that he is the mouth of truth. He is the voice of truth. Well, I understand maybe a lot of black Americans are probably looking at me going, well, you're not black, okay, and so you don't trust me, whatever. But you know what? It doesn't matter about me. What I'm about to show you is the facts of truth. Okay, and then I'm going to include links and things that you can go and you can look up and do your own research so you can face this truth. And then you make the decision yourself. One thing I would like to add that's going to be part of the next video is I want you to understand something, and you need to consider this fact. Over 400,000 white men fought in the Civil War, white Republican men, to free the black American in this country. So understand, white people are not against black people. And when you start to understand the truth of slavery within the world and this country in truth, you realize slavery was not just about black people. Slavery was about inhumanity. And there was probably twice as many white slaves in the world as there was black slaves in the world during the time when slavery was going on here in the United States. By the end of these videos, hopefully you'll have a clear understanding of that. You'll take the time to research that and consider the facts of truth. And like I said to anybody, anything I'm saying, if you think it's a lie and you can prove it's a lie, there's a comment box below. Comments will be available. And let's debate this. Let's talk about it, because to me the most important thing is the truth. When we come to the truth, we can become a unified true people, is what this country intended. One people of all equal, the Americans. That's my goal. So from this point here, like I say, when we listen to him, I want to touch on base real quick. This is Wallace Ford Muhammad. Surprisingly, Wallace Ford Muhammad, though there's controversy about things, but the truth of what is in modern day history, modern day understanding and study and research shows, he was in truth born in Arabia. He came to the United States to infiltrate, to get Islam brought into America, and he succeeded at his job. But he was not a black man. He was a white man who came here with the propaganda of Islam, and he came here to pitch a lie to the black American, to deceive them. And this all started in 1934, and what he went on to do was find another person, like kind of a criminally involved, very not educated man, Elijah Muhammad, and he would teach Elijah Muhammad that Islam was the true founding ideology of black Americans, and that Christianity was a forced religion put on them by the white slave owners here in America. But now the problem with that is that's not true. You see, Islam was founded in like the 7th century. Christianity is the 1st century. Okay, so Islam is only like 1,400 years old, or like or 1,300 years, 1,200 years old at the time when I'm thinking, and then Christianity is over 2,000 years old. You see, so Christianity was here first, and Christianity started over like in the areas like we know. Jesus fled to Egypt to hide, or well, Mary and Joseph did. And, so he was in that area. And as we know here from history, which I'll include links to this, and you can do your research. These are not just specifically selected articles to try and verify what I'm saying. Anyone who studies anything in history or does the research is going to find out it's very true. This states Christianity first arrived in North Africa in the 1st or 2nd or early 2nd century AD. And when we realize that Islam didn't really take off till 610, okay, so that's 610 years later, Islam emerges. And what most people aren't aware is that when Islam was exposed to North Africa in that time, there was many tribal African tribes that had their own cultural ideology and religions and mythical, deities or what have you. And but as Christianity came in, many of the Africans were converting to Christianity. Christianity took off pretty much around the world as a very popular religion because it mainly aligned with that of nature's God, like what was natural and self-evident. And it was a religion that taught and practiced a peaceful coexistence of all of humanity. And mind you, in a time when Christianity was brought into North Africa, there was no black African slave trade. That's not to say that in that time there wasn't black slaves, because there was. We know there was slavery going on with Egypt and Babylon and what have you. And in that time it was kind of, believe it or not, if you actually study world history, the majority slave at the time before Christianity emerged was white slaves. and this is a fact in history, for thousands and thousands of years of the slavery when it emerged in the world was for the majority white slaves. The black African slaves and as well other slaves usually were made slaves by areas of small little tribal conquerings and wars and what have you, and the victor takes the spoils kind of thing, and that's just the way it would go. And as well, even in Africa, with internal fightings going on among African tribes, if they would conquer another tribe, it was blacks enslaving their own black as well. If they conquered that tribe, they'd take their men as slaves and their women as like concubines or their sex slaves. And this was black on black slavery. And the same thing happened with white. In Great Britain, you had the kings of Great Britain, England, and Ireland, and Scotland that were enslaving their own white people and forcing them to work the copper brass mines by the tens of thousands, working them to death, no different. So this was not, like I say, slavery wasn't really a racial issue. It was in truth a humanity issue. And it was mainly a thing caused by that of the superiorists in the world, the superiorist scumbags in this world who think they're better than everybody else. But what I want to do now is get back to what we're talking about, the Nation of Islam. I just wanted to make the point to understand that Christianity was one of the first founding for the Africans as a religion. By the time Islam arrived in 640 AD, we're 600 something years later. Up until this point, there was really no black African slave trade as mass black African slave trade. And we come to find out that, that happened, ironically, by the Muslims. You see, the black African slave trade started in 640 AD when the Muslims invaded North Africa. And most people aren't aware of that. But we're going to get into that a little bit further ahead. But for right now, I want to prove my point about where the Nation of Islam is lying to people. Okay, and where they get the right. Under Islam, you have what's right here is called tiyaka. Tiyaka is an Islamic judicial term whose shifting meaning relates to when a Muslim is allowed under Sharia law to lie. And when you further understand the study of this, what I say, like my study of Islam goes back to a lot of studying in the 70s about this, reading about it, and then as well in 1988 and 89 when I was subject to being among a majority Muslim population for 2 years. And so it's not something new coming to me. I'm very aware of these things. So this is, like I say, they have a right to lie. And they use this tiyaka in the sense of being able to forward their purpose. The Islamic Muslims are a totalitarian foreign regime. And if you don't know what totalitarian is, that's a government of elitist form that looks and seeks to have world domination by enslaving all of humanity under its control. That's what it is. Islam itself means to submit to that of its foreign government who is in control of it, which, we'll talk about that as well, and I have other videos that expose this truth as well. I talk about these things in a lot of the Islamic and Christian debate forums that are online around the world. So we're going to continue on forward, though, real quick. So when we look at this here, and now I just want to show you something. Like most people are not aware. So anyway, we're gonna look real quick and just a quick rebrief of what we have going on here. So we know that in the Nation of Islam, it's told that this is the black man's religion. We're led to believe that Muhammad is a black man. We're led to believe that the founder, Wallace Fard, is a black man. And we're led to believe that Elijah Muhammad is a black man. And they're told that Islam is the black Americans' native religion of what they had back in the day with the Muslims. But is that true? No, it's not. And the reason why I say it's not, understand, Islam was founded in like I say, we're looking at like 600, 610 AD, 600 something years after Christianity. And in 640 AD, the Muslims invaded North Africa and enslaved the Muslims. At the time when they did their invasion on North Africa, there was a lot of, if they weren't tribal people studying their normal cultural ideology of deities that they had as tribal people, they were either Christian or Jewish. And Islam forced itself and force converted only the tribal leaders of Africa, not all of Africa. Because one, they're the founders of the black African slave trade in that time. And it became a lucrative business for them selling black African slaves around the world. Muhammad himself was a black slave owner. And ironically, most people don't know this, but Muhammad was a white man. And this is a fact by the Islamic writings. It's a fact by even some of the Islamic laws. And we're going to take a look at some of these things so you understand this is not my opinion. We'll look and see exactly what the Islamic writings themselves say about who he is. We're going to start with taking a look at right here. Let's just I'll just start with some of the Islamic right here. We'll take a look at this here, and you can see it says here, if you can see that clear, I'm hoping it comes clear. Right here it says, was narrated by, I can't say this man's name, I don't speak Arabic. I saw the messenger of Allah with a white complexion and some white hair. Okay, so I understand some people can say, well, that could mean anything. Well, you know, they go through extremes to make sure that people understand Muhammad was a white man. And we're going to continue on here with, like, we're going to look at this one. And as you can see in this, it says, was narrated. Here it says, I said to him, did you see the messenger Allah? He said, yes. He was a white with an angelic face. Okay, now I know some people, like, you know, the Muslims, when you point these things out, they have some things to say, oh, it was light glowing on him, and they have all kinds of ways with tiaka to be able to try and deceive people, to, you know, quickly disperse that to keep them believing the lie that Muhammad was a black man. But like I say, when we look and we keep going, we look at what they say. Well, when we start getting into what they actually say, let's just take a look here, and we see, like here, so much that the whiteness of his cheeks could be seen. See, now this right here, whiteness of his cheeks, and it gets better because they make sure to cover every part. You know, like here, you got the whiteness of his forearms. So you can see, they say the whiteness of his forearms. See it? Right there, as you see that, that's appearing, the whiteness of his forearms. See it? And then when you look here and you keep going, you'll see right here, they make sure they cover every part. Every part. Like here, the whiteness of his armpits could be seen. You know, and I'm just trying to point out the fact, these are the Islamic writings in the fatwas and in the Quran and what they call the stories of the followers of the messenger, his companions. This is what they themselves said about, you know, who he was and what was, you know, how he looked. They're describing Muhammad himself. It gets even further here, like they say. You can look and you can see here. We have it where it shows the whiteness of his leg. Okay, you got the whiteness of his leg. You know, at this point, I'm thinking maybe people are starting to get what I'm saying. They make sure to point out, but I know, you know, there's still ways to be able to twist this, where, you know, it's you know, it can be said that, you know, oh, like the Muslims do, they say, oh, it's the light, the way it reflects, the whiteness and purity of the man. You know, they come up with all kind of BS about what they want people to believe they're saying. But here we saw the whiteness of his thigh, you know, so I'm just going over. They make sure, like I said, they make sure to cover every part of this man's body as being white. And it's just like, you know, it's incredible. Like, I'm going to show you here, you got to where they go, and they say for the whiteness of his stomach. Okay, his stomach is white. So I'm just, you know, I'm just trying to make it clear to everybody so you understand it, that Muhammad was a white man. Okay, and it's just, you know, right here you got this shows the, you know, his white complexion. You know, it's right here. It says, I saw the messenger of Allah with a white complexion and some white hairs. I mean, this is pretty clear. And now we're going to get into a little bit more understanding of how racist Muhammad was. Muhammad himself, so you understand, I stated before, and I'll give a couple examples here. In Islamic writings, Muhammad himself, after they enslaved the blacks in Africa, Muhammad himself, as can be seen here, it says, I went to the house of the Prophet, and behold, Allah's messenger was staying in Musharba, attic room, and a black slave of Allah's messenger was at the top of the stairs. See, a black slave of the messenger. Notice, now, I'm going to say something to you. I studied world culture, religions, and history for 47 years. Prior to Islam, you never seen people in any prior writings of historical relation of people They might refer to them as like Philistine or Amalekites or like Babylonians, Egyptians, what have you. But there's not very rarely any distinction between black or white people until Islam comes along. And Muhammad wanted to make sure, as you've seen by some of the things I previously, that everybody understands he's white. And when he points out his slaves, he wants to make sure everybody understands, and what this is the way it is throughout the Islamic writings. When they reference a slave, they're either called a bib, which is the same as a black slave. That's what a bib is, a black slave. Okay, and he points out here his black slave of the messenger. So understand, Muhammad is a white man who owned black slaves. Maybe Muhammad Ali, Cassius Marcellus Clay, wasn't aware that Muhammad, the name he took, Muhammad, was of a white man who owned black slaves. How ignorant is that, right? You see? And this is what I'm trying to say to you. Understand, Muhammad Ali lived till the day he died believing in Islam, never knowing the truth. Never knowing this truth. Because no one could ever get close enough to the man to tell him this truth. And when you have somebody like Malcolm X who discovers this truth and is going to reveal this truth, you see what they did to Malcolm X. They killed him. They killed Malcolm X. Because he was going to disclose the very truth of the things I'm telling you right now. And that's a fact. That's a fact. Now, when we look here, like I say, we're going to continue on here. I want to say, like here again, there's another one from the Islamic writings where you can see here it says, Allah's messenger was on a journey and he had a black slave called Joshua, and he was driving the camels. So again, another one of his black slaves. This is Muhammad, the white man of Islam, the founder of Islam, a white man, white stomach, white thighs, white face, white complexion, white thighs, shins, stomach, armpits, forearms. They make sure you know he's white, okay? And he's got black slaves. They make sure in the Islamic writings to point out that his slave was a black slave. They don't just say slave, they say black slave. And throughout the majority of all Islamic historical records, when they're mentioning slaves, they specifically make sure to call a reference that they're black slaves. The reason for that was because under Sharia law, and even in the northern African areas in Western Africa, they converted only to Islam the tribal leaders. So they could get the leaders to give them prestigious status so that they would work with them, providing to them the common African tribal people that in big masses so they can sell them off as slaves. But the Islamic Muslims themselves could not be sold as slaves. It was forbidden in Islam to enslave a Muslim, and it's forbidden in Islam to sell even an Abib, a black Muslim. So you can only sell non-Muslim black African tribal people as slaves. And the Muslims were the majority of the world slave traders in black African slaves. Now, the reason why the black African slave became the majority slave around the world, because prior to Islam, there really wasn't that many there was hardly any black African slaves. The majority of slaves prior to Islam were white slaves. And then even with Islam, understand, they still as well captured many thousands of white Christian slaves and Christians and enslaved them too. They had the most lucrative, Islamic states were slave states. They sold both black African slaves and white Christian slaves. Predominantly they hunted for white Christian women to enslave and sell as sex slaves. But this is a fact. And the population of white slaves compared to black slaves was twice that of black slaves. If you really study history, you'll find that out too. But let's go on now. I want to just show so you get an understanding. Now, another thing about the Nation of Islam is they say that, and I know this because, I know a lot of people. I grew up in Newark. Like I said, I had a lot of exposure to this stuff and meeting with people. In the Nation of Islam, they're told that the Prophet Muhammad said that the white man is the devil. Again, they use tiaka. And this is a deceptive way to deceive people in a way to make them feel inferior. Like, they're the most important. And with the Muslims, they don't really, they've used the black Africans mostly in the past history for 1,200 years before America even existed. They had the black Africans enslaved, and they were mainly using the black African tribal people in wars. They would put them at the front line of their wars as their soldier front line to be slaughtered by whoever it was they were trying to overthrow. That was the main cause of them taking in massive herds of black Africans, was to use them to fight their wars for them. Like I said, they would put them at the front line to be the first to be slaughtered and let them, fight their battles for them. They enslaved them and then made them army regiments to put in the front of the battles, where they would send them in to fight other nations that they were trying to overthrow or other tribes. So that was the main purpose of what they used them for. But just so you understand, when Muhammad was asked about what the devil looks like, and it's so flipped around because, and then too, understand how this happens is there's two Qurans. There's an abrogated Quran and then there's the true Quran. The abrogated Quran is a soft conversion Quran that's used that has a bunch of nice things in it. They go and they, what do they call that when you, they stole the history of the Jews, the Christians, and they put it in there. They have a name for that. They call it where you take somebody's information. I can't remember it right now. But anyway, they stole everybody else, and they put all this stuff in to make it sound real good. And, they use it as a soft conversion. And once they convert people and they have become dominant, then they expose the true Islam, and they really force everybody at that point to either convert, and if you want to get out, well, then you get killed. Because there's no leaving Islam. Apostasy is not allowed. The only way out is death. And we can talk about that later, which I will do further videos on Islam itself to show the truth about these things. But so you all understand, when Muhammad was asked about what does the devil look like, in truth, he pointed out a black man, one of his black slaves. Whoever wants to see Satan, let him take a look at Nebet. Neptel B, I can't say the name, you can see it there. He was a sturdy black man with long flowing hair, inflamed eyes, and dark ruby cheeks. This is what Muhammad describes the devil as. They say this is, if you want to know what the devil looks like, look at this black guy. Okay? Now, in the Nation of Islam, they say that the white man's the devil. And this is how they confound things, because this is taking out of true Islamic written historical culture of his companions, his followers, and the true history of Islam and its true writings. I'm not making this stuff up. You can look this stuff up. It's a fact. And it's ironic how the Nation of Islam has lied to the black American people. And what we're going to do now is, as well, I'm just going to get to the point here. Muhammad was a very racist guy, and like some of the things even today that we see people fight over. Like if I was to say the term raisin head, you would think this is a modern day term used today as a racial among white American people, right? Where supposedly, according to the Nation of Islam, white people in America are the founders of all racism and slavery, which isn't true, because I hope you realize by now that Islam founded the black African slave trade 1,200 years before America even existed. They started the black African slave trade. Okay, and this is just a reality people have to wake up to and race. But going back to the races, right here, Muhammad referred to the Ethiopian black people as raisin heads, whose heads look like a raisin. This is the racism of this guy, and these are taken from Islamic sites, and you can find this. I've read a lot of his story on the Islamic Muslims, a lot of their stuff in their books and their fatwas and their companions' books and the Islamic scholar teachers' books and what have you. So I mean, I'm very versed and aware of this. I've been studying world culture, religions now for, like I said, 47 years. But just so you understand, he's the one who comes up with the racist terms like this. The other reason now, like I just want to get for right here, I mean, Muhammad was such a racist that if you called Muhammad a black man, you'd be killed. That's how much of a racist. That's how much he wanted. Now, you see, they're trying to make you believe, as the black Americans, that Islam's your foreign ideology from when you were in Africa. And what I'm trying to tell you is the God's honest truth. The Muslims invaded North Africa in 640 AD. After the invasion of North Africa, the only Africans they converted to Islam were the tribal leaders. The rest of the population of the black African tribal people were open for capture and slavery. And they started the black African slave trade. Muhammad was a white racist man. And in my study of history, Islam is the first ideology to emerge in our history of world history to where people actually devalue, degrade, and put themselves as elitist status over another people on the basis of their skin color. It was all racism. Muhammad is the father of racism. And this is a fact to anybody who actually studies world history, cultures, and religions of Islam. There's no denying that Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, or not the nation, but Islam itself, is the founders of black racial divide in this world. They're the founders of it. And here, like I say, it says here, he said that the judgment against anyone who rejects the Prophet is that he is killed, which I just told you. Anyone who rejects Islam gets killed. And then this is one of the companions of Muhammad's own words, said that whoever says that the prophet was black is killed. The prophet was not black. So understand, I'm not saying it. His very own companion who was right there with him, in his own words, is the man who says it in the Islamic historical writings. So, this, like I say, these are the facts of Islam that black Americans have to wake up to understand how bad you've been lied to. The thing of importance I'm hoping you all understand is to realize when you look back at Muhammad Ali and you realize this man lived his whole life not aware of this truth. He was so surrounded by these people, and they kept people out, anybody from telling him. He died never knowing this truth. He died never knowing that he took the name of a white racist man who was the founder of the black African slave trade in 640 AD, who started the black African slave trade, and who has despised black people so harsh that he made a fatwa law that if anyone called him a black man, they'd be put to frickin' death. Imagine if he knew that truth. Imagine. But he didn't. He died not knowing that truth. And I believe this man was a good man, and he believed his whole life the Sunni version of the soft, converted Quran, of the abrogated Quran. He never really was exposed to the truth of Islam. History and records of the FBI and the CIA and World International investigations found out, like people like when he went to Africa, and as well when Malcolm X went to Mecca, this was all a show put on for them, no different than what the Nazis did in World War II. There was times where American actors and people from America would go to Nazi Germany, and they would literally stage an entire town with nothing but actors, and it would make it appear when they walked through the town that everything was just like this utopia of just great peace and tranquility and loving and caring people, when in fact that was the furthest thing from the truth you could imagine. It was all staged. And the same, they got these tactics from the Muslims, because most people don't realize that Nazi Germany and the Muslims were allied in World War II. The Muslims in this very day are still the only still existing Nazi party members who are adherent still to the Nazi totalitarianism for world domination. That's a fact. But like I say, you look at world history and you understand this man never understood the truth. So what I'm saying to you is understand, and in here, I want you to understand, Malcolm X became aware and he was going to disclose the truth. And we're going to listen to this video real quick about after he started finding out some of the truth and he left Islam.
It has been a well-known fact, though only in the form of rumor, that there has been a great deal of apprehension at my being out of the black Muslim movement on the part of the black Muslims themselves. And I had stated in a newspaper article about an effort to take my life back in January, and at that time the Muslims denied it. In fact, they tried to make it appear to my brother that I was insane. But on a program in Chicago called Hotline, was moderated by Wesley South, John Ali, the National Secretary, admitted, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, one of these days last week, that they absolutely were going to kill me.
So as you can see, so you understand, I'm not making this up. Malcolm X, when he started becoming aware that Elijah Muhammad was a pervert pedophile, raping Chicago young black girls and impregnating them, and then he started indulging into deeper study of Islam and found out that he was actually only learned from what is known as the abrogated Quran, and he started to find out the truth about things. Like he found out the truth of who Wallace D. Ford was, which turned out to be a white guy, a white Muslim, who was looking to infiltrate America and bring Islam into America. And what they were going to do was use the black Americans as a foundation to be able to inject Islam into America, which they succeeded with. That's how Islam got into America, through the black communities, with this lie about the Nation of Islam. And here I just want to say to you, as a description of an Uncle Tom as a black man, who is, or any race man, who goes and deceives his own race or people against the truth by lying to them in practice for rewards from that of the ideology that's leading him to lie and mislead his own people. He's an Uncle Tom. Okay, and the world's biggest Uncle Tom right now is this guy right here. And I say that because, in the truth that I'm showing you, and the things I'm showing you, this guy has known since the very beginning. Farrakhan has known since the very beginning And what he did was the greatest con pulled on the black American in American history. This man did it because the money, the reward, the prestige, he was treated like a king. As well as most who rise up in Islam and do their job as a good, obedient, black, obese slave, they get great rewards for it. And Farrakhan has been rewarded greatly. He's knowingly sold his people out for decades. And the thing, like I say, when you're looking at him in this video, understand this man knows the truth, I'm telling you. He knows Muhammad's a white man. He knows the founder of the Nation of Islam was a white man. He knows the truth that Muhammad was the founder of racism. He knows the truth that the nation of the true Muslim nation of Islam was the ones who invaded North Africa and started the black African slave trade 1,200 years before America even existed on the earth. This man, from day one, knew the entire truth. He's the front man, Uncle Tom of Islam. He is their number one Ibib slave, who is the most obedient for the great rewards he receives in Islam. Just listen to this man and understand why he's saying this. He himself knows the truth I just showed and exposed to you.
I'm not here in Selma to create any problem. The problem is already here. Our people are not foolish. We don't need magic. We need truth.
I agree with that. Like I said before.
We don't need magic. We don't need deception. We need truth. Those of you in power, you know that you're deceiving black people.
Now, when you hear this man say this, understand, he is fully aware of everything I just showed you. Everything I'm showing you, we're going to continue on, because I want to show you something. You know, the ancestry of Muhammad himself is alive still to this day. And in the Arab true Islamic states right now, they all look to Muhammad's 34th grandson, and from the description is what I showed you of Muhammad as they describe him. And the reason they don't like to show anything of any kind of painted imagery of pictures of Muhammad, because it would give away that Muhammad is definitely a white man. But they say his 34th grandson, who exists today, looks very much probably like what Muhammad looked like. They say he is probably what Muhammad looked like in his time from the descriptions of the Quran. And what I would like to do is just take a look at Muhammad's 34th grandson. That's him. This is the man in the Nation of Islam. You're told to, not trust the white man. The white man can't be, trusted. White man's a devil. Well, I got news for you. This is Muhammad's 34th grandson. Look this up. This is him. And they say he looks just like Muhammad. This is Muhammad's 34th grandson. Take a look at him. Tell me. This is who you're worshiping in the Nation of Islam. This guy right now is one of the top heads in the Islamic states and top teachers of Islam. This is the man right here. They say looks just like the founder of Islam, Muhammad. This is his 34th grandson. Sheikh Muhammad al-Yak. I can't say that name, but that's who he is. He's Sheikh Muhammad. That's his 34th grandson. Does he look black to you? Because this is who you are worshiping. If you're in a Nation of Islam, this is the truth, I'm telling you. And I challenge you to go and look at these facts, consider these facts, and understand how you have been lied to. Because, and then too, like I say, when you look at this, I have to ask, what do you think? What do you think this man, had he known the truth, what do you think he would think today? But he died never knowing the truth. No one could ever get close enough to tell him.
And coming to knowledge of ourselves that we want to be called after names of our people, which are names to fit us black people. And Clay was a white man's name, was a slave name. And I'm no longer Clay, I'm no longer a slave, so now Muhammad Ali.
So, now understand, he says that Clay was a white man's slave name. Well, I want to show you, this is Marcellus Cassius Clay. This is the man he was named after. I'm a great fan of Marcellus Cassius Clay. Marcellus Cassius Clay to me is the example of what a true American Republican is. And I'm a true American Republican. The same as the same breed of that American Republican that fought in the Civil War and defeated the Democratic Party's Confederate slave states and freed all black Americans. I'm right up there. I love this man, Marcellus Cassius Clay. If you read a story about this guy, he was badass. He took nothing from nobody. And the Democrats tried to kill him many times. But in truth, his whole life, he was an abolitionist. He worked to end slavery. He never owned slaves. He inherited slaves from family members. Upon inheriting, he freed those slaves. He set up many educational things for slaves who fled the slave states in the South and the northern free states. He had helped assist in setting up schools to educate them, to give them trade skills so they can get jobs and live and be productive citizens as free people. This is Marcellus Cassius Clay. Never owned a slave in his life. And this is the man, the reason why his family named his mom and dad obviously knew the great man that Marcellus Cassius Clay was. He was an abolitionist who wanted to abolish slavery. Now, in history, Abraham Lincoln, during the time of the Civil War, was a Republican president who was the president at that time. But Marcellus Cassius Clay dedicated his whole life to trying to come to the conclusion of the Civil War, to free, without the Civil War, hopefully being able to abolish slavery. But it was him who truly should be recognized for the Emancipation Proclamation, because he was the man who Lincoln knew without the support of Marcellus Cassius Clay, he could never win the election for president. The issues of slavery and abolishing slavery all across the country was coming to a head in America in 1861. And Abraham Lincoln needed Marcellus Cassius Clay to be elected. And under the Lincoln, Marcellus Cassius Clay was a big contributor to the Emancipation Proclamation, and Lincoln did it on his push, Marcellus Cassius Clay. So understand, if Muhammad gave up a name of a white man who never owned a slave, who dedicated his whole life to fighting to free slaves in America and abolish slavery in America, he gave up the name of that man who never owned a slave and gave his whole life dedicated to fighting to free black slaves in America and give them equal rights. That's what this man did his whole life. And he took the name of a white racist founder of Islam, Muhammad, who was a white racist who founded the black African slave trade. Now Muhammad, and then Ali is Muhammad's cousin, which it's just coming to mind right now off memory because I do these things off the top of my head. But I'll find writings on that. I can put it up. You'll find out Ali, his cousin, as well, owned many hundreds of black slaves. Okay, so Muhammad and his cousin Ali were both white racist Arabs who owned hundreds of black slaves and who were the founders of the black African slave trade after the Muslims invaded North Africa in 640 AD. There's reality. That's the reality. So had Muhammad really understood the truth, he already had the name of a man who did not agree with slavery, and he gave up that man's name who fought in his whole life and gave his life to abolish slavery in his country. He gave up that man's name to take a true slave owner's name and a true white racist man. Matter of fact, he took the name of the most racist man in all American and world history, Muhammad. Muhammad's the founder of the black African slave trade. Muhammad is the founder of black African racism. Muhammad is the reason why the black African slave became the predominant slave in the world. And how that happened, I'm going to show you. We're going to take a look at an imagery here. I want to show you something, why the black American, or why the black African slave became the predominant slave in the slave trade. Was over, I just got to find it right here. I'm looking for something in Islamics. I can't find it right now, but anyway, I'll find it. I can post it. I'll put a link to it, whatever. But the reason that was because Muhammad at one point had converted a white man into Islam, and later after he converted this man, he found out the man was a slave, and the slave owner came and said, like, what right did you have to, convert my slave to Islam? Now he can't be a slave because it's against Islamic rule for a Muslim to be a slave. So what Muhammad did was reward him back and pay him 2 black slaves for his 1 white slave, because Muhammad felt that black people were only worth half that of white people. So he gave him 2 black slaves, and that became the value system now for black African slaves. you could buy 2 black slaves for the cost of 1 white slave. Because Muhammad did this, it became the value system of slavery. So in world slave trade, if you wanted to come and because the Muslims are the predominant people you would go to for slaves, they're slave states. They've been the predominant people for 1,400 years in the slave trade. And you were to buy a slave, they would let you know. You could buy this white slave for $10, or for $10 you can get 2 black slaves. If somebody wanted to just get slaves for labor, of course, they were going to pick black slaves. And this wound up being where the black slave became the predominant slave. When we come to the time of the transatlantic slave trade, which we're going to progress into now, I want people to pay close attention to this right here, and listen to this. Oh wait, this is the wrong one here. I'm looking at for. I wanted to go here. Actually, no, yeah, we'll listen to this. This is very today.
A man addressing an unseen crowd. Big strong boys for farm work, he says. 400. 700. 700. 800. The numbers roll in. These men are sold for £1,200 million, $400 a piece.
So, as you see right here, this is no joke. Right now in America, you got many of these ignorant black Americans in the Democratic-controlled ghetto cities that are ignorant to the truth of what I just told you about the Nation of Islam. This, what you're seeing right here, is actually happening in Libya. This is because under Islamic law, in Sharia, slavery is legal. And to this very day, right now, this is something that happened in 2017, this was filmed. They're still selling black African slaves. In Libya, in Iraq, in Iran, you can still buy black African slaves and white Christian slaves. Because the Muslims are a slave state. That's what they do. The only people that aren't subject to being slaves are those are the elitist, Arab, white, racist, superiorist Muslims themselves. Okay, so understand. And even as an Abib, a black Muslim, if you convert and you're black to Islam, you can only be a second-class Muslim. You can't be a true, superiorist Muslim because you're not white, and they're the racists. You see, only white are considered to be the superior first-class Muslim. Blacks are Abib, second-class. And put it this way: if a black Muslim kills a white Arab Muslim in Arabia, that black Muslim will be put to death. If a white Arab Muslim kills a black Abib Muslim in Arabia, there's no punishment. It's okay for a white Muslim to kill a black Abib Muslim, but a black can't kill a white. This is the truth. It's the fatwa, the laws of Islam. And I know this is a fact. But as we move forward here, I just want to give you a quick clip, and this is something that was on with the news.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Online Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight,
just so you understand, an African news that's translated to English, so you understand, I'm not just making this
the
stuff
slaves for a couple of $100. UN investigators in Libya speak to African migrants who say there is a shameful trade in human lives there.
So, understand, I'm just trying to get through this with as much time. Now, this right here is a man who's an African historian. I read his book. This book goes back to right. If I can find right here. This is his book, The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa. He really covers in real good detail about the truth of where the black African slave trade starts with the Muslims in 640 AD.
Transporting them into North Africa, into Saudi Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, and onwards to the Ottoman Empire to Turkey. So slavery was a very endemic part of Islamic interaction with Africa. And in West Africa, the jihad period of the 18th and 19th century involved massive slave raiding and slave trading. And many of the slaves that were captured and sent sold and taken into the transatlantic slave trade, most of those who were doing the raiding at the time were Muslim communities.
So I want you to understand here, in the transatlantic slave trade of the United States, which wasn't the United States at the time, mind you, when it started in the 1600s, okay, this was under British rule. The British were buying the majority of the slaves they were importing here to do the labor on the plantations that were developing in the southern region of the new continent They were buying them from the Islamic Muslims. It was the Muslims who were doing the massive raiding and gathering up. They converted the tribal leaders to Muslims so they would be exempt, and they gave them favors. They gave them like magical things, matches. To these people who were tribal Africans, these were like magic. And they gave prestige to the tribal leaders, who would allow them to come in and raid, and they would even have their own military. African people go rally up their own people into big congregations or groups to take out to the ships, and then they would chain them and they would slave them and sell them off to be shipped out around the world as slaves. So understand that the Muslims were the majority of the transatlantic slave trade was Britain and the Muslims. Understand as well. This here does not go, outside of the lie of that 400 years. That one, there was no Muslims were being bought and sent to the United States as slaves, because the truth is that Islam was banned in America in that time, and it was banned to buy. Right here, Muslims were banned from the Americas as early as the 16th century, and this was because they understood that there was a thing that happened where Spanish Island, they had a quick story. Just going to put this brief in. I'll try and include links to this story. So Spanish Island, they had transported slaves, and they had about, I think, something like 50 slaves or so that were on the island there being in transit. And it just so happened that the raiders were not so much the Muslims. These were people out of Great Britain who had done the slave raid on these, and they didn't realize they had captured several of the Muslim tribal leaders who were actually Muslim. And those Muslim leaders had coordinated with the slaves to do a rebellion, and they wound up killing like 20 of the white slave handlers at their place there in this rebellion. So after that, there was a decree, because they realized that the rebellion happened because of these Muslim blacks. So, and they realized that militant Muslim blacks would be able to cause uprisings and trouble. So it was forbidden to have any black Muslim shipped to the Americas. People don't understand this. And then too, as I say too, being the majority of all slaves in the transatlantic, what's this guy right here is an African historian himself. He's from Africa. Okay, he's telling the truth. You read his book. His book's incredible. I found this book fascinating, and the historical facts of his book are even more fascinating because they're evidence that's undisputable. But like I'm saying, when you look at these things and you understand the truth of things, you realize that it's just not one. Like I was saying before, under Islamic law, it's forbidden to even sell a Habib, a black Muslim, as a slave. So if the Muslims were dealing with the majority of the slaves being sold to Great Britain to be shipped here for labor, it was forbidden for them to sell black Muslims. So none of those slaves they were selling were Muslims. They were just innocent black tribal people of Africa being riled up by the Muslims to be sold as slaves. And it was the British king and the British Tories, who were the kingsmen, who were the ones who predominantly controlled the majority of slave trade, even in the new continent of the transatlantic slave trade that took place in what was known the Americas. But the actual United States of what we are today was not founded until 1777. And in the United States of America, slavery only existed for 83 years. And over the course of that 83 years, through the whole time from 1777 forward, which you'll see in the next video we're going to do about the truth of who the Democrats are, we'll explain about where slavery starts, how it was abolished, and its true history here in America in the next video on that. So look for that video. But we're going to continue on here. This is a guy who is actually exposed to what I'm telling you, who took the time to look into these things, and this is a black guy who's read that man's, or eventually, not in this time yet, he hadn't read the book, but he had read his book afterward.
I'm back with another reaction video called The Arab Muslim Slave Trade of Africans, the untold story. I'm going to react to this and see what it's all about.
I do this because I know you say I'm a white guy, so I want you to hear from a black man.
Don't forget to subscribe with the notification bell.
Mind you're an African
on my channel, there's a lot of reflections.
Real African legend. He's over there. He's really there.
Let's check this out and see what's going on. I don't know what it's all about, but we're going to find out right now and see what's going. You feel me? With that being said, let's get it.
I must admit that I too, among hundreds of millions of educated people, was under the impression that the African slave trade was the sole responsibility of the Christian Europeans, the white race. That is, until I started exploring the subject in greater depth and especially after reading an incredibly enlightening book called The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa by John Alabila Azuma.
That's a historian.
My whole perspective and understanding has changed dramatically, and I would like you to tell us more about this subject. The success of Muhammadan Islam in deceiving, misinforming, deforming, and contorting both history and reality over a period of almost 1400 years has been astounding. That is, until now. The greatest tragedy about this particular subject is that most of the descendants of African slavery, the black people in the Americas, around the world, as well as among the African blacks, are totally ignorant of the actual facts.
Really?
Before we lose the concentration of our listeners, I would like to make the following statement and then prove it. That the worst, most inhumane and most diabolical institution of the black African slave trade was initiated, refined, perpetrated, and implemented by the Mohammedan Arabs and later aided and abetted by the black converts to Mohammedan Islam. I believe that, as usual, the two subcultures, those of denial of facts and of political correctness, will attack us without once disproving a single statement and or conclusion that we make. Slavery.
Okay, so pretty much I'm coming to the end of this here. And like I say right here is I'll include links to these things. The first invasion of North Africa ordered by Abdallah, or whatever, I can't say these names, you can pronounce them if you want, commenced in 647. 20,000 Arabs marched on Medina in the Arabian Peninsula. Another 20,000 joined them in Memphis, Egypt. And this guy, whoever his name is, I'm not going to try and say it, led them into Byzantine extracts of Africa. Okay, so this is the history of the first invasion. And mind you, after this is where the Arabian Muslims enslaved the black African tribal people. Further study, you'll find out that the Arab Muslims, even during World War II time, considered the black Africans to be subhumans. They had recommended to Hitler that possibly they could use them as what they always have, as a front line of a military excursion where they would put the blacks at the front line, like they have been doing for centuries with the Muslims. This is how they mostly use the black Africans in their military forces to fight their wars for them, just killing them by the thousands, having them go and just line after line of them running into being killed, trying to overthrow other nations. That was the predominant use of the Muslims for the black Africans when they enslaved them, was using them as military frontliners to take weaken the nation before the actual Muslims would come in for the final conquer. After that, thousands and thousands of black Africans put to the front line were killed and slaughtered, and as well trying to fight for their lives, killed and slaughtered as many of the nation they were trying to overthrow. That's what they used them for. But like I say, the purpose of what I did this was hopefully to wake people up, so and give everybody a chance to see the truth and examine that truth and hopefully wake up to that truth. So, and the other thing that I would say to black Americans that are not aware of these truths, the ones that are in the inner city Democratic-controlled ghettos right now, are the black American in the Nation of Islam that wasn't aware of these truths prior. What I would say to you is, look at this truth and understand Muhammad Ali lived his whole life never knowing this truth because they were so surrounded by him. Malcolm X, a man who became aware and was becoming very aware of this truth and was going to expose the very things I'm telling you right now. And I know this from actual people who knew Malcolm X in Philadelphia from when I was younger. And I spoke with these people. And as well people that I met when I was exposed to an Islamic majority population who knew Malcolm X personally. Told me the truth of these things, and I got no reason to question them. They were not white people. They were black people who had themselves woken up to the truth and told me these things. So, and I believe them. I have nothing but their statement of what they told me to go by, but I have no reason to doubt them or disbelieve them. And the facts, if you study about Malcolm X in the end before he was killed, and you look at the speeches of his, it becomes very aware and clear that he was awakening to the truth of Islam. As well, I believe Malcolm X was same with Martin Luther King. While years later Martin Luther King was killed, was because Martin Luther King himself was going to expose these truths of these things I'm telling you, and as well other truths about the Democratic Party that they didn't want anyone to know. Martin Luther King, for the majority of his life, as far as I knew, was a very leaning Republican. He understood the truth of the history of the Republicans, that the Republicans were the, patriot Americans of the Union who fought to end slavery in the Civil War against the Democrats, who were the pro-slavery Democratic Party that was founded in 1828. I say 1826, they say 1828. You'll understand that in another video. There's a conflict between me and them because of archived files that I know of that can be traced back to 1826 that speak about the forming of the Confederate Democratic Party's Confederate slave states. But that's enough. Like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit in the next video coming up. But like I say, I just hope the black American takes the time to consider the things I'm saying. Take the time to do the research. Take the time to meditate on these things, think on these things, and realize how long since the 1950s this lie has been being told, and how it's still being perpetrated today on black communities and many of black Americans in the prison system and in the inner city Democratic-controlled ghettos, and how the Nation of Islam still to this day preys on the ignorant black American who is uneducated and unaware of the truth of history, and converts them, and pretty much is still using them as slaves, and a method of infiltrating this country to undo the very thing we did in the Civil War, free you. They want you back as slaves. They don't want you back as free people. And all the lies you hear about Islam, trust me, in the video like I showed you in the one video here, which we'll take a look and you can see is pretty clear. They are still selling black African slaves in the Islamic States to this very day. If you think the black man is safe among Muslims, you're very, very mistaken. Very mistaken. The Islamic States are a slave state. So I'm going to end with that. I gave everybody this to consider. You got all the facts. I'll include links to all these things that we went over. You can, review the videos. You can review the links. Do your own due diligence and research, and hopefully come to the conclusion to accept the truth, understand the true God of all creation is the God of truth. Truth to me is the only thing that matters. God tells me that you will always be able to prove a lie with the truth, but you can never prove the known truth to be a lie with a lie. The truth will always reveal the lie. Look for the truth. Thank you to everybody who's taking the time to watch my video. I ask anybody who's got any questions, you wish to debate it, comment it. I'll be watching for comments below, and I'm open to debate and discussion with the matter. We can try and do it as civil as possible. I'll do my best to give you as much information as I can in relation to answering any questions that you may have, or lead you to possibly being able to find the answers to questions you may have. Again, thank everybody for taking the time to listen to my video. Have a great day.